Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sportsballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the Sportsballers podcast. My name is Eric. I'm hosting this week. I'm joined by Evan and Corey as always, and also Scott Hansen, much to Evan's chagrin as he, for the third straight week, jumped out of his skin when Scott
Not really
came
chagrin.
on.
He just gets startled very easily by it.
Yes, and it's always...
It's loud and
it's sudden.
surprising.
It's very sudden, yes. But anyway, as much as we love Scott Hansen, and we do, and we appreciate his promo for our gig here. We've got a lot of topics to get through today, including some NBA stuff. It's my week, so we'll talk a little bit of that. We'll go around the league. I'll try to keep it quick because not too much has changed in the last 3 weeks. We got some MLB news. Pitchers and catchers have reported, and we'll get into that a little bit. We got some wrap-up on the NFL season as we head into potential free agency soon enough. And we got some other topics to get through as well. So let's get started in the NBA. I'll start out west this week because I think I started in the east last time. And we'll start at the top of the Western Conference. The Utah Jazz are on fire. They just keep winning, and they look like a team that most people would cynically say, yeah, they look great in the regular season and they're going to lose in the second round of the Clippers. But I don't know if that's the case because I think there's a really good chance they could actually hold on to the top seed. We know that the Clippers tend to like to coast, and the Lakers are a little bit banged up. No Anthony Davis for the foreseeable future for them due to Achilles tendinosis that he re-aggravated in a game against the Nuggets. So the Jazz are free and clear to keep winning, and realistically you can see the Lakers fall back a bit. So the Jazz could end up finishing with that top seed, and that gives them a pretty clean path to the Western Conference Finals. And once you get that far, it becomes a little bit of a war of attrition. You never know. And the talent there is proven. The issue they have is they don't have that big-time superstar that you'd like to see in a late playoff series. But some teams have managed to get to the finals without a guy like that. So I certainly wouldn't count them out, especially because they've got such young talent emerging. And who knows, by the end of the season, we may think of Donovan Mitchell or somebody of that ilk as that star. So keep an eye on the Jazz. I know it's unusual to hear that because normally the Jazz are just kind of a forgettable team that gets rolled in the first round of the playoffs, but they look like they're the real deal this year. So I'm excited to see if they can make a deep run when we get down to the late summer now, because the delay in the season has resulted in the playoff picture being pushed back a little bit. So we might not really know what the Jazz final form is until June or July, but I can't wait to see it.
When are the playoffs scheduled to start now? Because they usually start like right at the end of April.
Yeah, they typically start second and third week of April. I do know that we're about a third of the way through the season now, and it's been 2 months. The playoffs will begin on May 22nd, so a little earlier than I actually thought. So it looks like
a month late.
Yeah, it's a lot later than usual, but the season started almost 2 full months later. They did knock off 10 games, and it looks like they have compressed some of the schedule a little bit to get these games played. But, that's still pretty far away at this point. That's still 3 months away before we get to the postseason. And then, like I said, the deeper rounds will probably be like a month and a half after that. So we could realistically not be seeing a conference final until July 1st. So we still have a ton of season left. But it's been a pretty exciting season so far, especially because there have been teams like the Jazz that have popped up as a surprise potential contender in the Western Conference to go along with the Lakers and the Clippers. So as I mentioned, the Lakers are in a little bit of a tough spot. Anthony Davis is out for at least 3 to 4 weeks when he will be reevaluated after he re-aggravated an Achilles injury that he had sustained that had put him out for a few games. LeBron James has done a decent job holding the fort down without him, but that was mostly because they were playing teams like the Thunder and the Timberwolves and some of the dregs of the NBA, and they were winning, but not by much. And I fully expect when the Lakers start facing better competition more frequently that you're going to see some more losses get rolled in there. And frankly, it doesn't really matter that much. I don't know what the playoff situation is going to be like as far as fans go, because that's still a few months out. And I know some teams are trying to get fans back in the building, but it could realistically be a situation where home court advantage doesn't matter all that much because there's minimal fan impact. So, I mean, I don't think they should really sweat rushing Anthony Davis back. I think they need to make sure he's 100% because, home, road, neutral court, wherever, if they're fully healthy, they're still the favorites to win the West. And so the priority needs to be making sure that their best players are able to go come May 22nd.
I mean, the biggest impact a fan could have is a courtside Karen situation, because she could be heard loud and clear in a big empty arena.
Yes, that could happen. I'd be down for some courtside Karen style action during the postseason. Add a little more flair to it. The fans make watching the NBA in the postseason on TV a little more exciting. There's an extra juice in the arena. They make a ton of noise. It's a lot of fun to watch. So since we're being sort of, deprived of that awesomeness, we got to make up for it by dialing up the clown show to 11 with some of these crazy fans. So we'll move across town, and by across town, I mean cross locker rooms, to the Clippers. They look really good, and they don't look like they're a fake good team like last year where they won some games, but you kind of wondered, are they going to be able to put it together in the playoffs? They've come out this season with a purpose after their embarrassing showing in the bubble, namely Playoff P, or as we've called him, other derisive nicknames for his lack of performance last summer.
I think Playoff P is a derisive nickname at this point, given he gave the nickname to himself and he hasn't performed in the playoffs.
Yes, it's very sarcastic at this point, but there are also many other derivatives that I won't go into here. But he's playing really well, and I know that sounds like, oh, who cares? It matters in the playoffs, but he's playing some of the best basketball he's ever played, which indicates that he has a renewed focus. I know that he's going to have a lot of people questioning his ability come playoff time, and whether or not the pressure makes diamonds or busts pipes in this situation remains to be seen. But I think that the Clippers as a whole have gained a little bit of perspective, and I think that the humiliation from last year has motivated them as an entire team, because as bad as Paul George was against the Nuggets in that series, the entire team collapsed. It was not just a one-man sinking the ship situation. It was the entire team lost focus. Even Kawhi Leonard was just a non-factor in Game 7. And so when you have a situation like that, you need the entire team to come back and refocus, especially when you're returning so many guys. Like, it wasn't like they had an overhaul of their team. The only key guy they lost was Montrezl Harrell, and he's playing for the Lakers, and he's going to be a big piece for what they do in the playoffs. So that's going to make sure that the Clippers have to be extra good if they want to get past them. But I think that they have a fighting chance at this point. They're really, as much as I really don't care for the Clippers in a lot of ways, I think that they're a pretty darn good team, and they could be a threat. I mean, they're winning games against quality opponents in situations where both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George did not play. Like last night or 2 nights ago, they beat the Heat in a game where it was no Kawhi Leonard, no Patrick Beverley, and no Paul George. So they were missing 3 starters, and they managed to beat a finally fully healthy Heat team. That was an incredible performance. It just goes to show that the Clippers still have that depth that they had from 2 years ago when they made it interesting against Golden State, and that was before they got the star power that they have now. So I think that they're the real deal. So I'll move to a lesser team in the West that's sort of picking up steam a little bit. I talked about the New Orleans Pelicans and how disappointed I was in them, particularly because my Coach of the Year pick, as usual, is in shambles. Stan Van Gundy, his candidacy looked like it was going off like a Led Zeppelin. But perhaps he has risen from the ashes because the Pelicans are playing some good ball, particularly Zion Williamson, who had a stretch where he was like 12 of 12 from the field. Like, he is completely unstoppable off the dribble getting to the basket. he's becoming an offensive force that we kind of saw last year in the brief time that he played. But now that he's healthy and in better shape and coming into the season with a little bit of experience under his belt, he looks like he knows what he's doing and how to get to his spots better than he did last year, which is terrifying on the offensive end. The defensive end still needs a ton of work. The Pelicans still give up a ton of points. I wouldn't expect them to be a serious contender. I doubt that they could pull an upset, but they could make the playoffs or at the very least the play-in round. And while I don't think that's necessarily going to be good enough to get Stan Van his Coach of the Year that I awarded him back in, November, December timeframe, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But it's still a stepping stone type of season where they could build off of that going forward, especially because I do believe they have some cap space, so they could improve their team. They could potentially bring in a star point guard or somebody like that to really take that team to the next level and put them in that contending circle.
Is Stan Van Gundy as much of a disaster as Freddie Kitchens? Is it headed down that road?
No. Just Stan Van Gundy's a respected coach. He's had experience. He's played. He's coached in the NBA Finals before. He's got a history of being considered a high-quality coach. He's not Freddie Kitchens, who had no coordinator experience, let alone head coaching experience, who just came in and just was an absolute disaster, had no idea what he was doing. Stan Van Gundy is a legit basketball guy. Like, I don't think he's going to get fired by any means. I think he's there for the long haul. And obviously, if things don't go well next year or the year after, he would probably have to start worrying about his job. But I don't think it's going to get there because, like I said, the improvement's being seen right now. And if they make the playoffs, they get some experience there. This is the next step. It's all about progress from there. So I think he's in good shape. Not a Freddie Kitchens situation at all.
Okay. So, another question about Stan Van Gundy is what job does it look like he does? Because he seems like he gives me a taxi driver vibe.
I don't know. You think Stan Van Gundy looks like a taxi driver?
Yeah, he looks like he drives a car somewhere. He has a hat. This guy doesn't coach basketball.
I don't know how to respond to that because I didn't think I'd have to answer what Stan Van Gundy looks like. I know that he likes.
We ask the tough questions on this show.
I appreciate that.
I'll ask Eric an actual question that has to do with basketball. So you mentioned that you think that the Pelicans, if not the playoffs, so they could at least make the play-in round. I have not heard about this. What is the play-in round?
So the NBA decided to institute, sort of off of last year's bubble situation, where the 7 through 10 seeds, if you will have, I guess, like a sort of a 4-team play-in tournament. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the structure of it is, if it's round robin or what. But the 7 through 10 teams in each conference will play for the final 2 seeds to be the 7 and 8 seeds in that conference. So if you're the 10th seed, you have a chance to play for a playoff spot.
So I'd be interested to know exactly how that's going to work. Because if it's round robin, I guess each team would play the other 3 teams. You need to have a 3-0 team, a 2-1 team, a 1-2, and a 0-3, and those top 2 would make it. Or are they doing it using some other structure?
Honestly,
that seems like a lot of 3 games seems like a lot to play, for a play-in situation. But it also seems like it seems weird. You already had 82 games to prove you belong. Why are we even bothering, for the last 2 spots? Neither of these 2 teams barely deserve it as it is. And the 2 teams behind them, even less so.
Okay, so I've got the skinny on the format.
Okay.
So for the play-in tournament, the 7th and 8th seed in each conference will play each other for the 7th spot in the playoffs. The 9th and 10th seed teams will play each other for a chance to play the loser of the 7-8 game. The winner of the final matchup gets the 8th seed.
This whole thing still seems weird to me, but oddly, I kind of like that, actually. That's actually kind of creative and fun.
I don't hate it. When I found out that they were going to have play-in tournaments for playoff spots, I was like, that sounds ridiculous. But, I mean, it's more basketball, and of course the NBA loves that because that's more money. So
yeah, no, that actually sounds like whimsical would be the word I might use to describe that.
And of course,
dumb. It's pointless, but it's kind of fun.
And of course, I'll jump a little bit ahead to my last topic about this. The play-in tournament will be very interesting in the Western Conference because, in all likelihood, you're going to have teams in the 9 and 10 spots that are going to be pretty good. Like, it could be a team like the Pelicans that could certainly beat a good enough team to get in. Whereas in the Eastern Conference, you're going to have 4 awful teams that have no business being in the playoffs at all. So it's just like, it's a matter of what are you interested in? And obviously the Western Conference is more compelling because the West is way better. But the Eastern Conference is going to be a snore. I mean, you can see the Knicks playing in a game like that, which nobody needs to see the Knicks in prime time playing for meaningful basketball games after a 72-game slog. Once the 72 are up, the Knicks need to just go away.
The Knicks need to be like behind some type of privacy curtain or something. Like there shouldn't be fans allowed at their games, not only because of COVID, but because of the Knicks. They're just awful.
I agree. So I watched the game last night between the Suns and the Nets. The Nets were without Kevin Durant, who has sustained a hamstring strain. He was expected to miss at least this game and the next one. Hopefully he's able to recover. And Kyrie Irving also missed the game with a back issue. So it was basically James Harden versus the Suns. And the Suns jumped out to a 21-point lead to end the first half, and they lost. Yeah, that happened. James Harden willed the team to the victory, but he also got a lot of help from Joe Harris and some other individuals who had career games. And I don't know what the hell the Suns were doing in the second half. Their defensive structure was terrible. They kept switching DeAndre Ayton onto James Harden, which was a disaster. They had him playing out on the perimeter instead of just in the paint where he belongs, and he was just getting abused the entire time. Devin Booker was an absolute no-show in the second half. The only one that played well is Chris Paul, who basically kept them alive throughout the entire fourth quarter, hitting shot after shot. But eventually, just that's not going to be enough. You got to get a little help from your teammates. And James Harden ended up hitting the dagger late in the game. Devin Booker missed a potential game-tying shot, trying to draw a foul, and he looked terrible doing it. I don't really know what to make of the Suns right now. People were hyping them up a lot because of how they looked in the bubble at the end of last year. And, the addition of Chris Paul is obviously going to make you better, even with Chris Paul being 35 years old. But I think that, people hoping that this team would contend, I thought they were delusional back then, and I feel the exact same way now. This team's it's missing something. They don't quite have the defensive integrity that they need. And frankly, the offense is not as good as it should be either. When you got Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul in your offense, you kind of have some high expectations that that's going to be a team that's going to be able to put together a top 5 offense, and they're not there.
Is DeAndre Ayton good? Like, I know the Kings have gotten on the receiving end of some jokes for drafting Marvin Bagley ahead of Luka Doncic, but Ayton was drafted ahead of Doncic too. So, is Ayton living up to being picked first overall?
I think he is. I think he's a very good player. He's still young, obviously. He's only in his 3rd season. He's 22, and he's a big man. And big men have the toughest role in basketball when it comes to transitioning because they have so much defensive responsibility. He's been a very strong player for them this year. I think with the presence of Chris Paul, his scoring is down a bit because he has less of a role, but that also has made him a bit more efficient, a lot more efficient this season than he was last year. And I think that defensive, attention to detail has started to come around for him, and he's become a factor. He's not an all-star, and he's not Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic is clearly a better player than him right now, but I'm not going to say that it's certainly not on the level of Marvin Bagley, where that's a disastrous pick. Like, how do you pick Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic? You could not explain that to me for the life of me if you watched both players play, and presumably the person that picked Bagley did, but Ayton isn't quite in that same camp.
Isn't Vlade Divac running that team?
Yes, he is.
Oh, okay. So you could say that this Bagley pick was a bit of a flop then.
That's outstanding reference to a historic flopper and choker and bad picker, apparently, to Vlade Divac. So moving on to other things in the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors have kept their heads above water despite the fact that they literally don't have any centers. They're all hurt. Like all 4 of their centers on their roster are injured.
All 4.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
had 4.
Yes, you wouldn't have thought they had 4 centers on their roster until all of them started getting hurt, and then you realized you ran out because you only had 4.
And there's no COVID involved. It's not like the Broncos quarterbacks.
Now, when you say you only had 4, you're putting air quotes over that only, right? Like, how many teams keep 4 centers? Why would you need 4 centers?
I mean, I don't know. Some teams keep 5. Like, it's not really a surprise that teams keep that many players on the court or on the roster.
Like 15 players on your roster.
Sure, but centers typically take the most bruising because, like I said, they're the defensive anchors. So that's typically the position where you're willing to have more depth.
Yeah, but in a positionless game, do you really use centers as much? Like, you can play small ball so much more easily in today's NBA, I feel like. I mean, certainly there's still value in having a de facto big man on the court sometimes, but you don't need to run him all the time, and that can lower the bruising that they take.
Yeah, I think that part of it is also, like, Kevon Looney is one of their centers, but he also plays power forward. He's sort of an alternate between, he's a hybrid type of player, whereas James Wiseman is a clear-cut center. I don't know how the Warriors decide to construct their team, but they also have Marquise Chris, who can play a little bit outside as well. He can be a stretch 4 instead of just being a guy in the paint. 4. Yeah. I'm going to use my basketball jargon for you, Evan.
I have no idea who any of these people are.
Well, the 4 is the power forward. Stretch would indicate that he can play, almost a guard style of play.
Yeah, he can play out on the perimeter like a wing does. And that's some value he has, but he broke his ankle like at the second game of the season, so he's been out. They have some guy that they picked in the second round who hasn't panned out at all, but he's still on the roster for some reason. And then, of course, James Wiseman sprained his wrist a couple weeks ago. And he's still trying to come back from that. I think he should probably return pretty soon. And Kevon Looney's rolled his ankle in a game against the Mavericks or Spurs, I don't know. But it was a couple weeks ago, so he's missing time too. So basically, Draymond Green has had to play small ball center this entire time, which he can do. But you don't want him to do it for 36 minutes a night because, well, he's not a center. He's a power forward, and he's already an undersized power forward at that. So the Warriors have struggled to rebound the basketball without any of their big men out there, but they've also played good basketball for the most part in that stretch, primarily because, well, Stephen Curry is one of the best players in the world. He's playing at basically peak level. His efficiency numbers are resembling what he did in his unanimous MVP season where the Warriors won 73 games. And yet the Warriors are 15-13, which tells you just how much worse the team is right now as far as talent goes. When Steph Curry is playing as good as he did before, even with nobody to help take some pressure off of him, he's still putting up that kind of production. I think I saw a stat, and this is one of those useless numbers that they pulled kind of out of their ass a little bit, but Curry's had 10 straight games where he scored 25 or more points and had a field goal percentage above 50%. The record for a non-big man is 11, and Michael Jordan holds that. So we'll see if Curry can tie the record tonight. I'm sure they'll put that one on his Hall of Fame plaque if they do. That was sarcasm, by the way. I need my sarcasm horn from John Oliver. But regardless, he's playing really good basketball, and Draymond Green has sort of gotten back into his role as the facilitator. He's had like 15 assists multiple times in the last 3 or 4 games. So in his position as the small ball center, he's definitely taking advantage of what you can do offensively when you've got a small ball lineup out there. But they're going to need to get some of these bigs back soon because these guys are going to run out of gas soon enough. And you can't expect to have strong defensive teams out there with no bigs other than Draymond Green. That's just not going to cut it. So I mentioned 3 weeks ago that along with my Coach of the Year pick, which has become a running gag across all sports, my MVP pick in Luka Doncic was not looking great. It's still not because the team isn't winning, but he's playing much better at this point. He started to knock down his threes. There's been some regression to the mean there. His scoring numbers are way up. He's still racking up all the assists in the world. But the Mavericks just don't look like a good basketball team. And even with Kristaps Porzingis being back, it's just they don't have the defensive integrity that they need to contend. And these insane three-point shooting that they had last year that made them statistically the best offense in history has certainly regressed among Luka's teammates, which has resulted in the offense sputtering and the defense still being bad. And the result is you got a pretty mediocre basketball team. This could be a type of team that you see in the play-in tournament as the 9th or 10th seed if they don't pick it up, because they're sitting below 500 at the moment. I'm not impressed with the Mavericks right now.
That's so a shame, because that was a fun team. You know, the little bit I watched of the bubble last year, that was a fun team to watch.
Oh yeah, they made it very compelling against the Clippers in the first round. Luka hit that step back three to force a game 6, and he was playing through an ankle injury that during that series. And Kristaps Porzingis went down with an injury and missed basically the rest of it. I mean, if he had stayed in it, I still think the Clippers would have won. But based on what we know about the Clippers, they were ready to go home as soon as they got there. So the Mavericks could have potentially stolen that series if they had been able to stay healthy. But they look like a far cry from that point. And honestly, you know, as much hype as Porzingis had when he was a Knick, he just doesn't look like a complete player. I mean, he's a 7'3" shooter, which is wonderful, but I need my 7'3" guy to rebound and play some defense. I mean, when you're 7'3", you ought to average at least 10 rebounds a game. The average is like 6. So that's pretty sad.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it.
No, not good enough. Steph Curry almost averages 6 rebounds.
Right, I was going to say like that. Like that's a number that a guard can get easily.
Yeah, like now Curry's an underrated rebounder as a point guard, but he still shouldn't be out rebounding a guy that's literally a foot taller than him. So moving to the Eastern Conference, I don't have a whole lot to say about the East. The Sixers are still good. Joel Embiid's playing great. Ben Simmons had 42 points the other night against the Jazz, playing as the center. So he kind of did a little Magic Johnson throwback to the 1980 NBA Finals where Magic took over for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and scored 40 points as the 5. The difference is that they were playing the Jazz, and like I said, the Jazz are playing amazing basketball, and they still beat them by double digits despite Ben Simmons having the game of his life. So, it's no knock on the Sixers because the Sixers are good, and Ben Simmons played really well, but the Jazz are just on a different level right now.
Did Ben Simmons shoot?
What's your definition of shoot?
Well, I mean, you're the one who you started by saying he can't shoot, and then you started to like clarify that on the show. You were like, well, he can shoot, he just doesn't shoot enough. So did he actually like shoot the ball?
Does he know which hand to shoot the ball with yet? I don't think he's figured that out, even though he's in the National Basketball Association and gets paid for this.
So when I said he can shoot, I did I actually say he can shoot? Because I shouldn't have said that. He can't shoot. But I think I was trying to make the point that, you know, some guys can't shoot, but they'll still take shots. Ben Simmons not only can't shoot, he doesn't shoot. And in this game,
okay, see, because you haven't said not only. You said, well, I shouldn't say that. He just doesn't shoot. Like that's what you said before.
Okay, well then I miscommunicated because there's a reason why he doesn't shoot. It's because he can't.
Fair enough. Okay, so then I rescind my question because it's not important anymore.
Okay, well, it probably wasn't important, but nothing we do is important, so who cares? But anyway, the Sixers are good. They're still in first place in the East. I don't really know what to make of them until playoff time, though. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do because they feel like they're still missing a little something, and everybody in the East feels like that. So it'll be interesting to see who can take advantage of the fatal flaw better in the East to determine who goes to the finals. Speaking of potential finals teams, the Bucks are being really weird. They're losing a lot more games than they should based off of their production. Like they are underperforming their point differential by a ton, and really their defense is taking a big step back. I'm not sure what the deal is with Milwaukee. They should be better than they were last year based off the acquisitions they had, and the numbers indicate that they are at least as good in terms of points per possession allowed versus scored, and they're just not winning as many games. So that it could just be a regression issue. It could be a little bit of coasting going on because the previous 2 years they won 60-plus games and they were amazing in the regular season, and then by the postseason they got smoked. So maybe they're taking a little bit more of a relaxed approach to things. But I got to see something better than this, at least within the next few months, before I'm willing to feel good about me picking them to go to the NBA Finals like I did. Like I mentioned, the Nets beat the Suns the other night, showing a little bit of, showed some guts. They were able to win without 2 starters, which is their whole team, basically, is their top 3 players, given the fact that they traded away all of their depth to Cleveland and other places. But they still won a game against a team that's going to probably go to the playoffs. So you've got to give them credit for that. But the defense is still terrible. And I don't see how that's going to get better. James Harden acknowledged that. He said the offense is great. The defense is awful. And I think people don't give Harden enough credit for his basketball IQ, which he's shown this year as becoming the point guard for the Nets and being such an efficient passer. Like, I knew that he was capable of making that transition. The question was always going to be, can they play defense? And the answer as of right now is still no. So will they be good enough to shoot their way to an NBA title? It's possible, but I wouldn't expect it.
No, I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be wrong, but, I mean, Kyrie is back with them again, and isn't he a point guard? Like, why is Harden playing the point?
Because Harden's a better passer, and they've kind of worked it out. Like, Kyrie Irving actually straight up said that he and Harden worked it out where Harden's the point guard, Kyrie's the shooting guard. That's the division of labor. And so that's how it is.
Okay.
Because you're right, Kyrie Irving normally plays point guard, and James Harden normally plays shooting guard, but Harden's better at the prototypical point guard skill of passing, whereas Kyrie's probably a little bit better of a ball handler than James Harden. But Kyrie really only uses that ball handling to score. So you put Kyrie on an island with somebody, he's going to score on him, and he can pass. I'm not saying he's terrible at it, but Harden's clearly the best passer among the 3 of them, so he's best suited to be in that distribution role to make that offense click a little bit better.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was singing the praise of the Celtics, namely their 2 top stars, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But Bill Simmons is hitting the panic button after the Celtics fell to 13-13. They lost to the Wizards. And
Ooh, that's pretty damning.
And the thing is,
panic button. No, everybody in their entire organization needs to be fired. Everybody. You can't lose to the Wizards. You can't.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, but it gets even worse when you tell them how they lost. It's one thing, like if the Wizards score 140 on you and you lose because the Wizards were just hot, that can happen because the Wizards have some really good offensive players. They got Bradley Beal, and Russell Westbrook can have those games still. He's just not very consistent with it. But the Celtics lost by scoring only 91 points against the Wizards.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Don't play defense at all.
No, they don't. The Wizards are an awful defensive team.
How many times has a team scored less than 120 on them this year? You can probably count on one hand.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it ain't many. And certainly a team like the Boston Celtics ought to be able to score more than that. So I'm looking at the Wizards' numbers here. They're not that good offensively either, but they still have the talent to be good on certain nights. But defensively, their defensive rating is 25th out of 30, and they play at the fastest pace in the league, which means not only do they give up more points per possession, but they also give you more possessions than any other team, and yet the Celtics scored 91 points. Yeah, that's ugly stuff.
That's alarming.
Yeah, if I'm a Celtics fan, and I'm not, thank God, I'm just a Wizards fan who gets to not care. Because
if you were a Celtics fan, we wouldn't talk to you. That would be unpleasant.
Why?
Well, if I was, I bitch enough about my own team.
So against Celtics fans.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
Apparently, Evan does.
Boston fans are a little.
Well,
They can
yes.
be a
I
little
mean,
much
I
sometimes.
dislike a lot of
Is
Boston
what I
fans,
mean.
in particular Red Sox fans, but I don't have anything against the Celtics.
Well, now that we know that at least Corey wouldn't shun me for being a Celtics fan, I'll continue to talk about how the Celtics suck, and that'll be fun. So the Celtics are looking like a fake news team. I mean, they just don't look like the team that anybody thought they would be. It's another year where Boston is being left behind by the rest of the East somehow, because the East doesn't leave anybody behind. But for some reason, this team, with all their draft picks and all the fleece trades that Danny Ainge pulled and their young talent that they have, they're still one or two guys short of being in real contention. And at some point, the joke has been that, every time Jason Tatum does something awesome, people would still say he's only 19, even though he's 22 now. Well, eventually he's going to be 27, and you're going to be looking at this and saying, damn, we had Jason Tatum before he signed a supermax contract. We could have contended if we had just found one more star, and yet we never pulled the trigger. That's going to be the legacy of the Celtics. I mean, I was promised after the Nets trade that they made back in 2013, where they gave up Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, a bunch of old guys, for all of the Nets picks, that was going to set the Celtics up for a dynastic run in the Eastern Conference. And frankly, they're not going to make the finals this year, and I don't see a path forward for them to make the finals anytime soon. So it's not good enough.
So you call the Nets then, make another trade.
Yeah, they could, especially if the Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant thing becomes combustible. You could take one of those guys and ruin your team.
Yeah.
So that
trade
could,
back for Kyrie.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they're going to do that. They were happy to let him go. So bottom line, last note, like I said, the East is still terrible. I think the Golden State Warriors are the current 8th seed in the West, and if they moved to the East, they'd be the number 4 seed. So it just shows you where the power is in the NBA, and it certainly isn't east of the Mississippi River. So that's all I've got for basketball. I'll probably do this again in 3 weeks. I think the trade deadline is approaching pretty soon, so there should be some news there. I think the NBA's got plans to have an all-star game. Some of the players think that's stupid. I'm inclined to agree with them, but we'll see how all that goes. But for now, we'll move to baseball, which is back in action. Pitchers and catchers have reported to spring training.
Well, action's a bit of a stretch.
Well, they're there.
They're doing something.
They're on the field stretching and possibly throwing some. So
we have some breaking news. One player is not doing that.
Chris Davis.
No, the Mets have announced that Eric's favorite player has retired from baseball. Tim Tebow.
Cespedes? Oh, Tebow.
Tim Tebow has officially retired from baseball.
Oh, I don't care about that.
No, I know
Moving
you don't.
on.
That's why.
Moving on to the real athletes. So, in light of this, baseball season is always great. There's a renewed sense of optimism. You always feel like no matter what, you're 0-0 just like everybody else. And then you look at Fangraphs and they say
you have an 0% chance of making the playoffs.
Yes, the meme from Dumb and Dumber with Jim Carrey say, so you're saying there's a chance?
That does not apply.
There actually is no chance. It doesn't exist. So the Orioles comedically, I think for the second year in a row, were given a 0.0% chance to make the playoffs. And while I fully agree the Orioles aren't making the playoffs this year, this seems a little harsh. I mean, I don't think the Orioles are going to be the worst team in baseball this year. And every other team got at least 1/1000th of a chance of making the playoffs.
Right.
The Orioles got nothing.
Yeah,
like
I
the
think
Pirates are the worst organization. They're woeful and hopeless and miserable and sad, and they got 0.1%. The Rockies have no idea which end of the bat to hold on to when they're at the plate, and they got 0.1%. So how in the world the Orioles get a lower chance to make the playoffs than that?
My favorite part of that whole thing was the response that Fangraphs put on their Twitter to all the responses regarding that, where they changed everybody's playoff percentage to 100% except the Orioles, who stayed at 0%.
That somehow made it worse. Like, are the Orioles this much of a joke, right? Do I have to fill my entire bedroom with googly-eyed Oriole bird logos for anybody else to care about this team? Because it doesn't make any sense. Can we at least have, in the everybody gets 100%? Could we at least gotten to 0.1 at that point? Like, maybe.
Right. Yeah, like
if the Pirates and the Rockies again get bumped to 100, why can't the Orioles get 0.1?
You're giving them so you're basically saying that 29 teams will make the playoffs and the Orioles won't. It's like, what? It's just it's silly, but honestly, it makes you wonder though, because like I said, this doesn't really make any sense. The Orioles are certainly good enough to at least be better than some of the worst teams in the league. And we've talked about this before, where it seems like, I don't even know if it's intentional. Some people, I think it is, like with Keith Law, where we talked about how he always seems to run behind the consensus when it comes to evaluating the Orioles farm system. But it exists in a lot of these database type places like Fangraphs, which I read frequently. I'm a big Fangraphs fan. I read their content regularly. I check the stats almost every day during the season. But, it just seems like even when the Orioles were good, they got no respect from Fangraphs or any projections saying, oh, they're going to finish with 72 wins. I'm like, well, really? Because they won 96 games. What were you talking about? It always seems like that's the case, and I don't know why. I really don't.
I remember in 2012 when the Orioles were winning a bunch of games, and people would say, oh, well, they have a negative run differential. I'm like, well, yeah, but you're also trending to not have a negative run differential. And by the end of that season, it was positive. But the Orioles that year just, it was kind of fluky how they would lose, or they'd win 2-1 and 2-1 and then lose 12-0 in the third game of a series.
Yeah,
that's a -10 run differential. Obviously, you guys are terrible.
Yeah, the first 6 weeks or so of that season, the Orioles were definitely fake good, because that was when I went to the game where Josh Hamilton hit 4 home runs, and I was watching something like this. It felt like a typical Orioles game where they were just getting their asses kicked. I'm like, yeah, this. And then I remembered, I was like, wait, but we're actually
two-time defending
good.
American League champs.
I was like, wow, we're actually good though. How do we have this record, but we're giving up 4 home runs to one guy? I was like,
he was really good.
He was really good, but still, it was the Orioles doing it. But like you said, Evan, that team did pick it up, and by the end of the season, they were legitimately a good baseball team. They were playing like a good baseball team for the last few months of the year, and it showed in the wild card round when they beat the Rangers with
those same
Rangers. With Joe Saunders on the mound, which I was just like, that's the biggest give-up move ever, starting Joe Saunders against Yu Darvish in a winner-take-all playoff game. And
who would you have started? Chris Tillman?
No, probably Jason Hamill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was their best pitcher that year.
He was all right.
But then the Orioles actually, after they beat the Rangers that year, Corey can verify this, they played a really compelling series against the Yankees. And the Yankees were a really good team that year. There was no joke about that. They pushed them to 5 games, and it required the Yankees to pull a lot of rabbits out of the hat to win that series. I mean, they needed 40-year-old Raul Ibanez to hit a home run off of Jim Johnson to win Game 3.
So that was to tie Game 3.
Yes.
We had to wait for Raul to come back up again.
Yes.
And face Brian Mattis, who won't be missed.
No.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, but regardless, the Orioles were actually pretty good that year at the end of the year, and they kind of carried it over to the following season, where I actually thought the 2013 Orioles were better, but the wins kind of regressed back to the mean. Jim Johnson was not closing the games to keep it 2-1. He was reopening them to make sure that we didn't make the playoffs that year, and he was promptly dismissed and replaced with Tommy Hunter, who was also terrible, and then Zach Britton took over.
Tommy Hunter.
Yes, Tommy Hunter was the closer.
Yes, Tommy Hunter, the closer. Oh, my God. Oh, boy. He was terrible.
That was bad news. But since we're making fun of the Orioles for having no chance to make the playoffs, The Yankees were given quite a good chance. I think it was like 91% chance of them make the playoffs, but the Rays were surprisingly low too. They're given like an 18% chance to qualify for the postseason after they just won the American League last year.
I haven't really followed their moves. Like, I don't think they've really lost anybody, have they?
Traded Snell.
Snell.
Other than him, though, I mean, does he account for that high of a percentage from 100% down to 18?
No, because he didn't even pitch really well during the season last year. Granted, it was only 60 games, but the Rays have a stable of young studs all the time. That's how they build their team. They've got prospects out the wazoo, and they still do. They still have the top farm system in baseball. And I just don't see how they're not in the mix for the playoffs. I mean, they were so good last year.
I mean, it's clear to me that the Rays, they just don't have enough sexy names, right? Like if, say, the Rays had signed Matt Harvey and Felix Hernandez, they'd be at 97%, right? These are big name people. So it's just the Rays. It seems like they do with smoke and mirrors, but it's really, really not. Like they have a lot of really good players. They're just not a whole lot of famous, really good players.
Yeah, but that's how you build World Series teams. I mean, the Yankees back in the 90s, I mean, their biggest name player was Derek Jeter. And, Jeter was great, but even in some of those seasons, that was when he was young, and he wasn't quite a superstar early on in that run, and yet they still had really good players at all 9 positions and good pitchers, and obviously Mariano Rivera at the back end. And they just beat everybody with a team of good players, but how many Hall of Famers were on those teams? Derek Jeter, that was kind of it. Yeah.
Well, Mariano Rivera is the other one.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So, Corey, do you have anything to add about the start of spring training regarding Yankees or anything else?
For the Yankees, I think probably the biggest piece of news that's come out in the past day or so is that Clint Frazier has been named the starting left fielder, and Brett Gardner is not currently a Yankee. They have not brought him back so far. Well, they haven't brought him back. He was a free agent after last season, and they haven't signed him to a new deal. And I don't really know why. I mean,
are the Yankees crying poverty suddenly? Can't afford Brett Gardner.
I can't imagine they're crying poverty over him. He's not. He historically hasn't been a guy who demands an enormous contract, but he's a really good, sturdy player. Unlike a lot of our other outfielders, he doesn't tend to get injured a whole lot, despite being in his late 30s. I think he's like 36 or 37 now. His on-base percentage was over 350 last season. He's been starting to hit some more home runs lately, but probably the most important thing about him is that he's a left-handed bat, and the Yankees don't have a lot of those. We have hardly any.
Which makes no sense because
that's where you want this is the stadium for left-handed hitters.
Robinson Cano was going to have a Hall of Fame career by playing for the Yankees. You just hit it 210 feet down the line, and it's a home run.
We saw what happened with Didi Gregorius in here. I couldn't understand why they got rid of him at shortstop, because he's not typically known as a home run hitter, but he was hitting home runs all the time, especially in clutch situations for the Yankees, and a big part of that is that short porch.
Curtis Granderson hit 50 home runs one year.
At this point, basically all that we have on that side of the plate, we've got Aaron Hicks, who's a switch hitter, and then we've got a couple of guys who were really good in 2019, but then sucked last year, those being Mike Ford and Mike Tauchman. That's it as far as left-handed bats. What are we doing? Bring the man back. We've got room for him. He mostly plays center field when he plays. Sure, he can play left, but bringing him back does not keep us from having Frazier as our starting left fielder. It doesn't prevent Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton from being in the lineup, because one of them can just be the DH. So I don't understand why the Yankees are not bringing Gardner back. We're going to wish that we had brought him back if we don't.
So on that note, I know that Aaron Hicks gets hurt all the time, But wouldn't he typically be in the starting lineup ahead of Brett Gardner when he's healthy?
Probably. I think part of it would depend. So yes, he probably would. But what I would say is that when we're facing a right-handed pitcher, we might potentially start Brett Gardner instead of Clint Frazier in left field.
Well, so I know that it seems on paper like Brett Gardner should still be a Yankee, but Clint Frazier's pretty damn good player.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm glad that we never went through with any of the potential trades that were rumored to be in the works regarding him.
And is he a capable hitter against left-handed pitching?
I mean, he's a pretty capable hitter in general.
So he doesn't need to be platooned.
Probably not, but
when
you've got a lineup that is this lacking in lefties, I
get where you're coming from that point, but my issue though is just there just simply doesn't seem to be room for him. I mean, you've got Hicks under contract. Judge has to play, obviously. He's your best player.
Giancarlo has to play still.
Yeah, Giancarlo's got to play. And Clint Frazier is probably out of options at this point. And even if he wasn't, he should be in the lineup anyway because he's that good.
If he's not, there are too many options in Major League Baseball because the number of times that he has been brought up and sent back down is absurd.
Yeah, so
almost as many as Kevin Gausman. Remember that?
Oh, God, yeah.
On every week.
Yeah, along with TJ McFarland.
Oh, goodness gracious.
he just existed. He just existed to be sent up and down. The constant manipulation was just like, yeah. But
I mean, on the A's last year.
Yeah, I don't know where he ended up. But yeah. So Corey, I feel your pain a little bit here especially because Brett Gardner has put in so much time with the Yankees and has been such an underrated player for them. But it just seems like they've got too many options, and he's the odd man out.
I mean, this isn't a bad problem to have.
No. Well, but could he play a different position? Like, I don't know. Could you have
play first base? Who's the first baseman?
Yeah, who's your first baseman?
I'm not sure what the situation is at first base yet. I mean, I'm pretty sure Mike Ford was. No, Mike Ford wasn't first base last year. I forget who was first base last year, but
was it Luke Voigt?
Yeah, it was Luke Voigt. So he's probably going to be the first baseman. We also have Jay Bruce on a minor league deal, and he's been invited to camp. And I mean, he's the kind of corner outfield first base, and he is a left-handed bat. So I guess
should lower your expectations for Jay Bruce.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect much from Jay Bruce.
I mean, he's still hitting home runs when he's in the majors, but other than that, he's been kind of worthless, I think.
Other than that, he's been kind of worthless.
I mean, home runs are nice, especially in Yankee Stadium, but
who's pitching for the Yankees? Because that's their problem. Like, this is how the Yankees will figure out how to blow the AL East this year.
I don't know.
Paxton's back with the Mariners.
What was that?
James Paxton's back with the Mariners, so he's no longer with the Yankees anymore.
I wasn't very impressed with James Paxton last year. Anyway,
he's always hurt. He's always hurt.
To be honest, so that doesn't really disappoint me too much.
The Yankees sent Tanaka back to Japan to dominate over there.
So I actually don't know off the top of my head, other than Garrett Cole and I guess Corey Kluber, who we brought in.
Don't count on him pitching much.
Right. So I haven't looked too much. I've been kind of scared, quite honestly, to look at the pitching situation.
What about Severino and his elbow?
Yeah, how's he doing?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'll have to take a look at that for next week's podcast and do a little bit of looking into what the pitcher situation's looking like.
Yeah, because he's been down since 2019, so presumably, assuming his recovery is going on schedule, he should be back at some point this year.
He was so good. I mean, the Yankees did sign him to a 4-year extension a couple days ago, I think. So I would assume that means that they think that he's on pace to, if not start this season, at least make a full recovery and start at some point this year.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy John people usually come back from, so I expect him to at some point be in the Yankees rotation and be a difference maker again. But I mean, that's two guys, so that's two reliable pitchers you got. I mean, I'd be concerned.
I also don't know what the deal is right now with Herman. and quite frankly, I hope that we don't bother bringing him back.
Yep, got that. That makes sense.
I think that we were like supposed to sit down with him a few weeks ago, but that was the last I heard, and I haven't looked into it since then because I really don't. I mean, I guess I care to the extent that I don't want him on my team. Quite honest. I'm like,
yeah,
if he's out there and he's winning us games, I'm honestly going to be a little bit annoyed.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just got to kind of swallow it. Like, you hate it, but at the same time.
Like, I'm happy we're winning, but I'm really upset that it's him who's
giving
us those wins.
Yep.
I will not be drafting him for my fantasy team, and I will not be picking him up off of waivers for my fantasy team.
It's probably a smart move. So we'll get into more baseball stuff as spring training progresses as we get closer to opening day. As we've already discussed, Corey will have more stuff with regards to his Yankees as we get a little more information about who's going to be up and down. Evan and I will obviously do the same thing with the Orioles and the other teams around the league if interesting news pops up. So, but that's all we've got from Major League Baseball. So we've got some other topics to get into regarding college athletics. I'll start with college basketball. The big story of this week, and it's not really that big of a story, but it's a story. Jalen Johnson, Duke big man, has opted out of the remainder of the season.
It's not called opting out when it's this late. That's called quitting.
Yes, that's the main reason why I decided to discuss this story was because of all the crybaby stuff coming from the college basketball pundits about how awful this is, because I've never understood this about college basketball fans and people that follow it. And of course, this doesn't apply to everybody, but a big contingent of the people that follow college basketball and analyze college basketball for a living, they love college basketball. They hate college basketball players. And that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but that's how it is. I mean, we've seen this happen. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to be upset about this. I mean, Duke is like 8-8 total for the season. Coach K doesn't even think they should have it. Of course, he's mostly saying that because his team sucks and they're not going to make the tournament. But nevertheless,
they beat Georgia Tech. So
okay, well, congratulations.
Ooh, congrats to them.
That's a quad one win, all right. But they're screwed, and they're not going to make the tournament. And Jalen Johnson's dealt with foot injuries this year that have put him out of games. Coach K isn't even starting him at this point. So he said, all right, well, I'm probably going to be a lottery pick. I'm going to bounce. I'm going to, shut it down. The team's not going anywhere. And so we've got all these people freaking out about how awful this is and how terrible this kid is for quitting on his team and all that jazz. And I'm like, it's a case of a bunch of people insisting on being angry on behalf of a bunch of college athletes that nobody asked them about, right? Like, it's always like, oh, what about your teammates? Well, the teammates probably understand. They usually do. But what about your coach? Well, the coach told him to do it. So what's your problem?
Signed up for this.
What more do you want than that?
like Coach K fully supported this kid's decision to opt out. And Coach K is not typically one to just wantonly side with the players. He is okay with this. He gets this. So, I mean, if Coach K doesn't have an issue with it, as much as I dislike Coach K for various reasons, namely that he coaches Duke and Duke's good and I hate Duke, he is an authority in college basketball. So if he says something's cool from a player-coach relationship perspective, then it's fine. So why even push this other than the fact that your precious little world of exploitation of these college athletes is starting to crumble piece by piece, and you don't like it?
Yeah, I mean, these players are not paid to play. I mean, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. They're not paid to play. So what is the argument here? Oh, he's going to quit. If he's quitting on his college teammates, he's going to quit on his pro teammates? No, because he's going to be getting paid at that point.
He's leaving anyway. It's a completely
different story. It's a completely different story.
Yeah. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of much ado about nothing, but that's really why we're talking about it, because the Twitter self-righteous people are like, oh well, he should stick it out and not quit on the seat. But like, if he should stick it out, then like, what, he should stay all 4 years instead of just 1 year. And, I can't fault this guy for making a decision that's best for him. Frankly, he should, like, what's the point of playing at Duke for the 1 year? Like, if you're out of high school, you're going to be a lottery pick. Then go get ready for the draft in 2 years. Go train and stuff. So if he doesn't want to play at Duke anymore for whatever reason, whether it be coronavirus or maybe Coach K's mean or something, that's up to him.
To be fair, Evan, I would imagine that a lot of the people who are poo-pooing this decision by him to opt out are probably the people who would say, these college athletes need to stay for all 4 years. The one and done thing is dumb. And to be fair, part of the reason why I don't really watch as much college basketball these days and I don't enjoy it as much is because of the one and done, because there's so little consistency from year to year. Or continuity is really the right word. There's so little continuity from year to year. You don't, it's hard to keep track of all the moving parts because you don't have players who are there for 4 years very often these days, at least not the good ones who really make an impact to the point that who they are throughout the season. But
build a story.
Just because that makes it less interesting to me doesn't mean that I think that the players need to stick it out. Which is one of the reasons why I don't have a problem with this. And I think most people who are okay with the one and done, who are okay with the players leaving to get their money, probably are not, among the contingent, or at least are not prominent among the contingent of people who are, crying foul.
Yeah, I find this all to be very nostalgic for people that are whining about this. They desire a day where basketball players went to college because they wanted to, not because they are forced to. And that's this current situation is college players that have NBA prospects like Cade Cunningham. You think he said, wow, I just really got to be an Oklahoma State Cowboy? Really?
I don't know who that is.
Exactly, but he's probably going to be the number one pick in the draft, and he's playing at Oklahoma State, who isn't very good, but he doesn't care because let's just go to the NBA. And same thing with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons played for LSU. They didn't even make the tournament. He was the first overall pick in the draft. He got what he needed out of the relationship, and I think people don't like the fact that these players are only interested in going pro, which they should be because that's the dream. Nobody dreams about being a D1 athlete. They dream about being a professional athlete.
If you want them to want to play in college, pay them. It's that simple.
But we don't do that here, Corey.
Yeah. I mean, you have to build these lavish athletic facilities, like at Clemson with their indoor slide to get from the second level to the first level, and their spectacular weightlifting thing. And to pay Dabo $93 million, but we can't spare any money for the players.
They paid Dabo $93 million, and he goes on ESPN and says, yeah, but you lose me as soon as you start talking about paying athletes.
Yeah, I'll quit my $93 million over the course of 10-year job if you start letting the guys that I coach have some money. It's
right.
crazy.
Yeah, it's comical. If each of Dabo's players got $93 million, he still wouldn't leave. Because if he's getting $93 million too, he's not going anywhere. This is comical. This is nonsense. More foolishness out of Dabo.
Yeah, he's just talking smack.
Yeah, what college basketball should do, or I don't even know if they have control over this, if they get rid of the one and done rule, if players can go straight to the NBA from high school, then the only people playing college basketball will be the people who want to play college basketball. So then, why? I mean, you could still leave early if you want, but you fully and willingly signed up for the college basketball experience. So you won't have the best players. But you'll have people at least want to be there.
Yeah, but college basketball hates that idea because you'll have some people who are diehards who are, loyal to their teams and all that stuff. But the broad national audience that college basketball needs, specifically at tournament time, relies on having nationally recognized talented players that are going to go pro. Like Zion Williamson being in the NCAA tournament was a huge deal. Him being at Duke was a huge deal because, like I've mentioned, I hate Duke, and I don't have much interest in watching their games. But when Zion was at Duke, if they were on TV, I was watching.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
That was the case for a lot of people because he was appointment television. CBS had a Zion cam that just followed Zion around. And they want to act like the players aren't the reason why people tune in. It's because of the college basketball tradition. No. It's about the players. Always has
actually been. Tune in to watch Coach K just frown
and growl and whine at people. That's
I would pay for. I would pay for the Coach K cam.
Yeah, Zion in the tournament was also the last time they had the tournament. So,
yes, that's true.
It's been a little while.
Yes, it has. So that'll do it for our college basketball griping about people who gripe. So we'll move on to some college baseball stuff. D1 college baseball starts on Friday. Evan, your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets host Eastern Kentucky to kick off their season. How are you feeling about that?
Whatever. The season tickets have already sold out for Georgia Tech baseball. By the time I decided I wanted some, they sold all of them because they're only doing 20% capacity. So that puts kind of a capper on how many people you can have at the games. But, we were in the also receiving votes at the bottom of the rankings list. I
was going to ask.
Some baseball is back.
I was going to ask. I don't see a number next to your name. I was surprised by that because I figured Georgia Tech would be ranked. So I guess they're. Maybe you'll get there. I mean, just have a good start to the season. You'll be in the top 25 soon enough. So another big game though that Evan is interested in tuning into, and a big series is number 8 Miami is heading to Gainesville to play number 1 Florida this weekend. That sounds pretty intriguing for me as well, so I might want to check out some of that. It's on the SEC network, so if you don't have that, well, then I guess you might have to stream it or just, forget about this.
Or pay money, right? Like, if you want to watch sports, it costs money.
Yes, it does sometimes, but some people don't feel like paying money, so I respect that as well.
They don't want to watch sports.
There you go.
That's too bad. That's how it works.
Indeed, that is how it works. So moving on to the Daytona 500, yes, NASCAR, our favorite sport or activity, whatever you want to call it. But this was the Daytona 500, the biggest race of the year, and Michael McDowell won the 2021 Daytona 500. This year's race was interesting because it featured a 6-hour rain delay, and there was a big-ass crash at the end of the race. But I did notice, because I did catch glimpses of the race it was on Fox, I believe, and I noticed that the race was being run at night. And I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen the Daytona 500 or really any race that I tuned into, which is pretty much exclusively the Daytona 500, being run in prime time. And I thought it looked really awesome. I was like, it was actually kind of cool to watch the cars zipping around the track at a night event. It added a little bit of something extra to it, I thought. I doubt they'll stick with it, but it added some intrigue to it. But Corey, you have somewhat of an interest in stock car racing, so tell us what you thought about this.
Well, I didn't actually watch it. Evan put this in the sheet because he watched the whole thing.
I watched it.
Evan was posting some updates. So, my interest in NASCAR has kind of waned a little bit. I mean, like I do find it a little bit interesting, like the actual. It's weird calling it athleticism, but like there is very much a sport element to it.
The skill, yeah.
It's not just pressing the gas and steering. Like there is a lot more nuance to it, and I've found that very fascinating. But, I got sort of into NASCAR a few years back because my grandfather was really into it, and it was something that we could text about, and I could talk to him about, hey, I watched the race and, this happened and that happened. And that was so cool. But, since he passed away a few years back, I just don't watch as much now. But Evan, what did you see in the race?
Well, I mean, I was watching off and on, and then, the race itself was off and on for a long time because of rain. I enjoy the super speedway races. They're always really close and chaotic and crazy. I not really into it enough to understand all the nuances and stuff. Like I can't even drive a stick shift car. Like I don't know any of that. I just see them going around and around and around. Like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. There's a big crash. Like I think they only ran like 15 laps before the rain showed up. There's a big crash that took out like 16 cars right before it started raining. And like Jeff Gordon would explain, break down. Well, this guy, he was a little bit to the side, and he bumped this person, and that caused him to go straight into the wall, and then he spun around and took out all these people. Like, oh, and he points out exactly what little detail caused the big crash. So that was pretty interesting. And then I had assumed that, once it started raining, I had assumed they would just pick it up Monday night. So like I turned the TV off and played Roller Coaster Tycoon the rest of the day. And when I went back to eat dinner at like 9:00, I turned the TV back on, and they're like, "Oh, we're just getting started. We're about to get going again." Like, oh, okay. And Eric, like you said, the night race aspect made it really interesting. Something about having it in prime time under the lights made it feel like a big deal. There's certainly no big crowd there, but I enjoyed it. I think I watched about half of it.
So
I have no idea who Michael McDowell is. I've never heard of him in my life.
It's interesting that you bring up the race was so close because historically races at Daytona and at Talladega usually are pretty close, but a big part of that has always been because they use restrictor plates in NASCAR for the super speedways. They limit the top speed. You don't really need them for the other races because you almost never reach speeds, approaching 200 miles per hour on other tracks because you don't have those super long straightaways. You have more turns. Turns last a little bit longer on a lot of the other tracks, whereas at Talladega and Daytona, you have much longer straightaways where you could easily top 200. And I think since 2019, when they last used them, those speeds have increased. But one of the side effects of using those restrictor plates is that now pretty much every car, has kind of the same speed range that they're in, which tends to make them close. It's also one of the reasons why these two races in particular tend to have the biggest crashes.
Mm-hmm.
It's because
one of the things they really broke
packs.
down was, oh, okay. One of the things they broke down on the broadcast was the drafting. They'd have one car right behind another one, and that would sort of boost them both forward at the same time.
Yeah, I also like the side drafting. So if you come up next to a car in just the right spot, I think roughly it's like it's either where your front bumper or your front tire is in line with their back tire. It actually decreases the speed of the other car. So like you can, it's almost like a reverse draft where you make them slower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You increase the drag on their car.
Basically, yeah. That's pretty much what it does.
Okay, because I saw the highlight tonight about because Denny Hamlin was dominating. He's the guy from those Domino's commercials where the little girl says,
"I like your PJs."
Yeah, that commercial's just delightful.
I love that commercial.
So yeah, he was dominating the whole race, and then like 5 people all got one behind the other to draft together, and they just zoomed right by him, like he wasn't even there. Yeah, and that was the decisive moment, other than the fiery crash at the end.
Yeah, it's that slingshot.
Nobody was hurt in the fiery crash, which is amazing.
NASCAR has come such a long way, safety-wise. Just, the fact that you can take away these restrictor plates, allow them to achieve higher speeds, which is going to, inherently cause crashes to become even, more scary and everything. But it's amazing what they have done with technology inside the cars, just with the cages and everything since Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s death at Daytona 500. They've really done a fantastic job on that front, just in research and development on making these cars safer for the drivers. You almost never see serious injuries anymore in these crashes. Oh
yeah, nobody's died in a NASCAR race since Dale Earnhardt Sr.
We almost had a break on that because of Tony Stewart trying to intentionally run somebody over on a dirt track.
What?
Yeah, this was a few years back.
Intentionally run somebody over?
We're pretty sure that it was intentional. It looks pretty darn intentional. It seemed like he swerved. Oh, like the guy's like standing in the middle. So
why are you standing in the middle of the track?
Long story short, Tony Stewart and some other guy, I forget who it was, but they got into a bit of a crash, and the guy gets out of his car as Tony Stewart, continues in his lap around, and he's like just pissed off because he's pretty sure that Tony Stewart like caused him to crash intentionally. So he's standing in the middle of the track, like pointing at him. And as Tony Stewart's like driving up, the guy like runs back up toward the wall. And there's a pretty noticeable swerve toward and then away from the guy on the part of Tony Stewart. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think he might have actually hit the guy and the guy was in the hospital.
The guy died.
Oh, he did?
Yes, that guy died.
How did I forget that detail?
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. That guy died.
Yeah, that's a really big detail. I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah, he didn't make it. Looked like I don't remember exactly what happened, but like he got
hit by a car. He
got clipped, and he ended up like near the wheel well, which resulted in him basically spinning a lot, and he obviously died from his injuries. But Tony Stewart was cleared of any criminal charges or civil charges or anything like that. He was found not to be responsible for the guy's death. So
I don't buy it. I saw what I saw. There's a very distinctive swerve. I don't buy it, but legally he is not guilty, so there you go.
I mean, he wasn't even charged, so I mean,
he was.
I don't know.
Then
I have no idea.
Regardless, as far as while you're in the car, you're pretty darn safe these days.
Yeah, and it should be pointed out that dumbass shouldn't have been out of his car walking on a live track.
That's
let's be clear. That was unintelligent on his part, regardless of what Tony Stewart's intentions were. But we're not here to litigate that case because, frankly, I don't really remember. I watched the video, but it was so long ago. I don't really have an opinion on whether he did it on purpose or not. But
no idea.
At this point, it's ancient history. So we will move on.
I think that concludes our NASCAR coverage for 2021.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. I find it funny because I have 3 uncles that race cars, and I have zero interest in car racing. I just don't care. Anyway, we'll move on to the NFL. We got some offseason news, some shenanigans going down with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Urban Meyer decided that he was going to hire Chris Doyle as his team's strength and conditioning coach. Chris Doyle had previously worked at Iowa, where he was promptly dismissed on account of being racist and abusive to his players.
I think something like, was it 13 of his players had to go to the hospital explicitly because of the exercises that he had them doing in strength training. And then, yes, on top of that, a lot of black players have called him out for being discriminatory toward them, for being racist.
Yeah, seems like something that would get you disqualified from being hired in the NFL as being racist, but apparently not. How the whole NFL is like, oh yeah, we'll hire the racist guy, no problem. That's what we do around here.
And one of the things that this really, signified to me was, Urban Meyer is the guy who, we've talked about the fact that, we didn't see black coaches hired this year, right? A bunch of white guys, despite the fact that we've got some black coordinators who are more than qualified to be head coaches. We have some former head coaches who seem to be interested in being head coaches again in Marvin Lewis and Jim Caldwell, who did not get a job. And yet here, Urban Meyer is the guy that out of all of these situations, he was pegged as the head coach before any sort of interview process took place. this was the Raiders all over again, where they have their guy, they bring in a black guy to interview in quotes, simply to appease the Rooney Rule, but they already have their guy. They already know who they're going to get. Of all people who should not be hiring a guy who is known to be racist, it's the guy who should be trying to not put any sort of, spotlights on himself for anything to do with racism.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing, Urban?
Yeah, because Urban's like, no, I checked him out. He's a good dude. It's just saying the quiet part out loud. It's just the good old boys network. And you have to just kind of fit the description or something, some of that crap that they say. So, it's ridiculous. So what's this guy's name? Chris Doyle. He resigned on Saturday, I think.
He resigned very quickly after being hired.
Yeah, why did it take him resigning for him to not have this job anymore?
Right. Now we feel like we have to give him some sort of credit for realizing that, his past transgressions should disqualify him from this. No, you do not get any credit, but somehow he's going to get some from people.
What does it take to get disqualified from, coaching NFL? What does it take to, get convicted and impeached? What do you have to do? Seems like at some point you would have committed some sort of unforgivable crime. But
seems like all you have to do is not be white.
Not. Yeah.
Yeah, this has happened before, though, with Urban Meyer. We know that he's got woefully bad judgment with who he employs. He's not a good judge of character because he's not of good character. That tends to go hand in hand. There's no bigger scumbag in football than Urban Meyer and the people that he typically employs. This is not a controversial statement that I'm making. It's a factual one. So it shouldn't come as a shock that Urban says, I know Chris Doyle for 20 years back at Utah when we coached together, except for the fact that Chris Doyle was not working at Utah when Coach Urban Meyer was there. So that was a lie. Something that Urban Meyer also
just made that up.
Yeah, he's Urban Meyer's a liar. He's a consummate liar and just an objectively horrible person. He's a good football coach, but that's about all you could say about him that's positive. And so he thought hiring this guy would be okay because he got away with hiring dudes like this in college. And frankly, he shouldn't have gotten away with hiring people like that in college.
In college, you can do whatever you want because when you're the head coach, you're also the GM and essentially the owner.
And you're
in charge of the whole thing.
And people don't pay as close attention to the position coaches and stuff in college football.
And nobody cares that they're mean to the kids because, like we said, people who like college sports hate college athletes. Mm-hmm. We've already talked about that. They like the fact that the strength and conditioning coach is racially discriminatory against players. That's their getup. That's what they dig about it. So it's not going to affect people like that. But when you get to the NFL, when you've got certainly a more progressive group of fans, the media is definitely more strident against racism, and the players are certainly less likely to tolerate it because guess what? They make 5 times as much money as you do. They could push a button on you, not the other way around. You think if Russell Wilson wanted to get Pete Carroll fired, he'd walk into that office and Pete Carroll would be fired that hour. It wouldn't even be close. Can't do that when you're a college athlete. So this is a situation where Urban said, hey, I can do whatever I want because I'm Urban Meyer, and he quickly found out can't do that in the NFL. Shouldn't have been allowed to do that in college. We shouldn't accept that from college coaches doing this. Situations like this people need to be held accountable for hiring people like this. And for all the clowns on Twitter, they get out there and say, why doesn't this guy deserve a second chance? Because he hasn't rectified the first chance he blew. He hasn't actually taken time to take accountability for his horrible behavior. All the guys that we talk about, the players like, Tyreek Hill and Greg Hardy and people like that, they at least serve a suspension before they're given a second opportunity to get back on the field. They have to show some type of remorse, even if they fake it. And usually when they fake it, they get caught and they end up not lasting long anyway. You can't hire a guy like this. He hasn't shown any desire to grow. He got fired. He got his previous school sued into oblivion, and within a couple of months, he's working in the NFL.
What? He got a promotion.
Yes,
basically.
He got a promotion for being awful because the guy hiring him is awful.
Yeah, like, I mean, deserving a second chance. There's some stuff you do, and you do something so terrible. No, you don't deserve a second chance. Like, I'm sorry, you just don't. Like, you blew it that bad.
Yep, no doubt about that. So we'll move on to some other NFL news regarding people actually working in the league. J.J. Watt was released by the Texans last week, I think. He was cut loose, and so he's a free agent now. And despite the fact that Watt is clearly not the player he once was, he's got a little bit of an injury history the last 5 years or so where he's struggled to stay on the field. He's still a pretty productive player and could be value added to a lot of teams. And, I've heard rumors that the Cleveland Browns are interested and that J.J. Watt is interested in them. So where do we think J.J. is going to end up?
I don't know where he's going to end up.
The Browns are a really intriguing spot. I mean, you pair him with
terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you put him there with Myles Garrett. That defensive front is
poor Joe Burrow, right? Like the guy is already injured, coming off of one horrible injury. Now we bring in the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh my goodness! So that's a really intriguing spot for him to land. I don't know where he's gonna wind up. The really fascinating thing about this to me though was the fact that he went into the office and asked to be released, and the Texans were like a genie, just like your wish is my command. But here Watson wants out, and they're being assholes about it.
Why didn't the Texans try to trade J.J. Watt?
Because he asked to be released.
But why didn't they try to trade him? Like, I'm sure they could have gotten something.
Well, I'm sure they could have, but he asked to be released, and they did what he wanted.
Okay, but here's the problem, though. With J.J. Watt, he had 1 year left on his deal where he's earning $17.5 million. So if a team wants him, then they would have to extend him because you can't have J.J. Watt on your roster at that number. It's simply not economically defensible from a salary cap standpoint. So as a result...
But talking about the Texans, though, like, why didn't they at least try?
Probably because they couldn't get anybody back. I mean, they knew that they were going to have to cut him loose. They weren't going to extend him. I mean, pretty much everybody that was looking around was saying, why am I going to give something up for a guy who's going to get cut? Especially if I know that he wants to be here because he'd have to waive a no-trade clause to come here. So there's simply too much game theory and leverage favoring the other teams versus the Texans, where they're really the only viable option the Texans had was to cut him loose. And with Deshaun Watson, I think that you cut J.J. Watt loose because you wanted to. And you don't cut Deshaun Watson because you don't want to. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's under contract for another 3 seasons. Why would they want to? They don't want to trade him. They want to keep him. So they're not having any desire to get rid of him. I understand why they're not gung-ho to get rid of him, and they're going to hold on to him and force him to apply as much leverage as possible to make this happen. I mean, do you think Deshaun Watson's going to no-show camp? I mean, he might.
I think he will. Deshaun Watson does not seem like the kind of guy who bluffs to me. If he says that I'll hold out if you don't trade me, I'm taking that as gospel. I'm assuming that he is going to hold out.
Okay, and I think you could be right about that for sure, but I also know that the Texans have every right and reason to say, maybe not. I'm going to make you do it beforehand because, like I said, the Texans are awful, and it's easy to hate them. And it's easy to hate on them because they've been a trash heap organization pretty much since they became an organization. But at the same time, in this instance, I get where they're coming from. They've got a marquee top 5 superstar quarterback in his prime that they just signed to a long-term extension, and he wants out. They're not gung-ho to trade him. So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but, like, They were terrible with Deshaun Watson. Like keeping Deshaun Watson, I mean, it helps them win, but it doesn't help them win enough to make them win games, if that makes sense. Like, they have him on their team, but they're not going to win any games because, he's just one guy.
Right, but getting rid of him doesn't make them better, though. Like, you don't get rid of a top 5 quarterback in his prime and improve. That's even if you get a bunch of picks, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but you also don't get better by getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay, but that was stupid. We get that. I'm talking about this incident, though. Like, anything they've done before was dumb, and they're going to continue to do dumb stuff, but they're going to be better for keeping Deshaun Watson versus trading him, regardless of what dumb stuff they did before and the inevitable dumb stuff they're going to do immediately after he stays, if he does.
Okay, so they're going to, go 4-12 and really, really earn the number 3 pick in the draft because they blow every game every week, like worse than the Chargers. But they'll have earned that number 3 pick and have already traded it to another team.
Probably, yeah.
They're going to do that. Oh, wait, they just did that.
Yep.
That's going to happen.
Slow clap for you, Houston.
Yep.
Yeah, so, they need to go full blow-it-up mode because the foundation they're building on is made out of crap.
Agreed.
And not concrete.
Yeah, but you're still relying on a bunch of idiots to try to rebuild it, which means it's going to suck no matter what. So you might as well have a good quarterback.
It's like the Orioles when they signed Sammy Sosa then. Like, oh, well, we got this one player. We're obviously going to win. Like, no.
Okay, but Sammy Sosa was trash. So would you feel that same way about Miguel Tejada? Would you have been happy if the Orioles traded him?
Well, I've loved Miguel Tejada.
Exactly. You love Miguel Tejada, so there you go.
Yeah, that's not a good example because I am irrationally attached to that player. Right? I have 2 Miguel Tejada jerseys in my closet right now. So, that's not a good example. The Texans need to trade Deshaun Watson because they can't win with him, and they certainly won't win without him.
Okay, so I don't see how that makes them have to trade him. They're going to suck either way. So
they have this asset that they're just going to hold on to while it declines in value.
I mean, he's still a little ways from declining in value, I think. He's still pretty young.
Well, he's going to decline faster behind that offensive line.
That's true.
Okay, but the number one job of a team is somehow, in all this madness, the Texans managed to do the one thing that you have to do to win consistently, and that's find a quarterback. So I understand why they wouldn't be in a hurry to give him up. They've
managed to upset him so much that he refuses to play for them.
And if that's the case, then he will be traded.
That's a special skill right there.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt they've screwed this situation up. But I understand why they would say, all right, we're going to make you go all the way and sit out, which, again, I hope he does because I want him out of there. I think football fans in general, outside of Houston, even most Houston fans might even say, this guy deserves so much better than us to move him out. But, at the same time, I understand why the Texans wouldn't want to do that. But anywho's, I
think we all agree. Well, we're
arguing over this. We're arguing over nitpicky stuff, but that's what we do. So we'll move on to some other quarterback drama. Russell Wilson, who perfected the art at a very early age of saying absolutely nothing while speaking for an hour, has actually come out and said stuff, which means he's pissed. There's no other way to take it. When he goes on Dan Patrick and he says, it'd be nice to not get sacked 394 times in 9 seasons. That's pretty much him saying, fix this now, Seattle. And, of course, then the Seahawks get pissed at him for going on public radio and crapping on the team and saying they're not doing the right things, which is mostly just them saying, wait, Russ said something? He actually said something of worth to the media? That's a problem. So, this is where we are.
Yeah, I mean,
I still really don't think that there's that much here. I think that this is, much ado about very little. I think that Russell Wilson is, he's what? He's 32 years old now. He's made his bones in the NFL. he's a known quantity. And, as a young player, especially a young black quarterback who was very everybody wants to criticize him and his play and his height and all of his attributes. He very intentionally was very quiet early in his career. At this point, he is a little bit older. He's a veteran in the NFL. He's proven what he can do. He just won the NFL Man of the Year award. This might just be him being willing to come out of his shell a little bit and be a little bit more outspoken. This doesn't necessarily mean that he's pissed or that he wants out of Seattle. I think this is just, him acknowledging, it'd be nice if I wasn't on my back all the time. It'd be nice if, we could get some offensive linemen. And I can't imagine the Seahawks organization is really that upset with this. They have to know that they've put him on his ass way too much over his career. I mean, this is approaching and maybe has even exceeded Jay Cutler in Cleveland or in Chicago levels. I don't know why I said Cleveland. This, Jay Cutler was constantly on his ass in Chicago, and this has probably exceeded those levels at this point. They have to know that that's the case. They have to be able to appreciate where their star quarterback is coming from, where their franchise, the face of their franchise is coming from. I don't think that there's really that much drama here.
Oh, I mean, there isn't that much there now, but where there's smoke, there's fire.
I don't think I don't think there's that much smoke. I really don't think that this is even smoke, to be quite honest.
I mean, you smell that burning smell. Like, what is that? It's a little something from over there. When people who don't talk much say stuff, it carries more weight. So, like, when Russell Wilson says, "I'm tired of being clobbered on every single play," it's like, oh, well, this guy, he never says anything, and he said something. I think that it means it's worth listening to even more.
Well, but
this is Dr. We Notice again. Like, he gets sacked all the time because their offensive line sucks. You don't have to tell me.
Every reporter who has any kind of inside information on the Seahawks is saying, all of them are confirming Russ isn't going anywhere. They are not trading him. They are not looking to trade him. I have absolutely no nervousness about me in putting 30 points on Russell Wilson to be their starter in week 1. None whatsoever.
I'm a little apprehensive. Remember when, because both of y'all were at Maryland. Remember when Maryland to the Big Ten whispers started coming out? And remember everybody thought, that's just crazy. Like, they're not going to go to the Big Ten. They've been in the ACC for 50 years, and the tradition and the history and yada, yada, yada. Right? Like, it first starts coming out in drips and drabs, and all of a sudden, bang! The big event happens.
Yeah, but the problem is Maryland was run by idiots. The Seahawks are not really run by complete idiots. They just
the Seahawks' solution to Russell Wilson getting sacked all the time is to run the ball more with their terrible offensive line. So perhaps they might be run by idiots.
I mean, running the ball more does prevent sacks, technically.
Doesn't make their offense any better, though.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm definitely more inclined to agree with Evan here. I get what you're saying, Corey, that, maybe now Russell Wilson is starting to emerge as somebody who talks a little bit more, but Russ has been around for long enough and has been a star in the NFL for long enough for this not to be the first time this has come up, because this has been an issue basically his entire career, at least since Marshawn Lynch retired or got injured or aged out of the league. So,
all three of those are
people change. Sometimes it's inexplicably, it seems very sudden, but we've got something going on in the world these days that could potentially lead somebody to be a little bit more outspoken, and being locked down with the coronavirus all this time, has
you're
a way of changing
need to be more
people.
Specific.
Yeah,
Has a way of changing
going on in the world,
changing their attitudes and the way they go about life.
But
makes you realize that life is too short to not say something when you can.
But my thing is, it's not so much that Russell Wilson didn't talk. It was like I said, he talked a lot, said absolutely nothing. He voluntarily went and spoke at more events than he ever needed to flex, this sort of humble, good guy attitude thing. This is off brand for him. This is absolutely a deviation from what we know. This isn't Kawhi Leonard, who doesn't say anything to anybody, so nobody knows what he's thinking. Russell Wilson tries to give you, enough to put a brand on him for being the good guy teammate, which he is, and he deserves absolutely all the credit for it. Like you said, man of the year, all that good stuff. But this is the first time he's made pointed comments in 9 years. To me, that's not nothing. And honestly, and maybe part of it is also I'm just kind of hoping he gets traded because I'm tired of watching him play for that team that sub-optimizes him, just like with Deshaun Watson. Move them all around. Let's make this happen. Let's play
them all to San Francisco.
Why don't we just have a fantasy draft for the NFL? All new players on all new teams.
I did that in Madden, and it was amazing.
It is kind of fun sometimes to do that. But no, yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to say that this is not nothing, that Russell is not actually, annoyed about this. I mean, he probably has been, he has every right to be. I just don't think that this is him being so pissed that he's saying, I want out of here, without actually saying that out loud. I don't think that's what this is.
But I do think it is. He's putting the team on some notice, though. I mean, if they don't address the offensive line issues, and if the answer is, again, well, we're just going to run the ball 3 out of 4 plays instead, then I think the situation could change. I really do. I think that if this is another season where Russell Wilson is sub-optimized because of poor line play and things of that nature, I think it could turn into something. I'm not sold that he's going to be traded, but I am also not sold that the Seahawks are going to meet his requests because they haven't done it yet. And the most obvious thing to do when you've got a generational talent Hall of Fame quarterback is to at least keep him upright. And they haven't even bothered to try. So this clearly is a team that doesn't believe that's necessary, and they're going to scoff, and he's going to get more pissed. And we could be having this conversation next year, except this time it might be for reals. He's going somewhere else.
That could be the case. I don't think that is where Russell is right now, though.
Sure, but my belief that Russell Wilson will be a Seahawk in 5 years is very low.
That is low for me as well. I don't think that will be the case either.
All right, so we'll move on to some other quarterback stuff. God, there's a ton of quarterback crap this week. That's just fun, but this one's not as fun, I don't think.
There's no games.
There is no games, but the drama can be neat. I mean, we're talking about quarterback roulette for the first time ever. That's never really happened in the NFL. But the Seahawks general manager, Kevin Colbert, is it Colbert or is it Colbert? Did I say?
I think it's Colbert.
I think for him it's Colbert, but I did also think Colbert when I saw it at first.
It's spelled like Colbert, and the most famous person with that name is Stephen Colbert. So I'm going to call him Kevin Colbert, though, because I think you guys are right. So Steelers general manager Kevin Colbert is non-committal on the future of Ben Roethlisberger with regards to him playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. His quote was, "We told him, quite frankly, we have to look at this current situation." So, I mean, this doesn't really surprise me. Ben was not very good, especially down the stretch of last year. He seemed to struggle throwing the ball down the field for big chunks of the season. He's old. He's got a history of injuries. He's not exactly on the TB12 diet. So, I mean, I think it's fair to question whether or not they should move on. Now, I don't think they have great options, and I know that Ben's got a big-ass cap hit, but I also know that Ben has expressed interest in trying to work to make that work better for the Steelers. So we'll see how this goes, but if Ben wants to come back, I think he'll be back with the Steelers. That's just my personal feeling, because I don't think there's an alternative for the Steelers at this time.
50%, like 2020 Ben at 50% is still better than any of the other options they have in-house.
Sure, absolutely. No doubt.
What are you going to do?
The draft is coming up.
You're going to go to Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges? Please, get out of here with that.
I think they got rid of Duck Hodges. It's,
I think they might have too.
The former WFC guy. What's his name? We talked about him for a long time. Haskins.
Yeah, they brought in Haskins. Which is hilarious. Yeah, no, Hodges is with the Rams now, which is funny because he's also in the Rams in my my Madden league.
Fantastic. But
Just full on cool story, bro.
I mean, that is very much cool story. We're talking about Duck Hodges in Madden. What?
We're also talking about Duck Hodges in real life, which is equally ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just as bad. And then we took it another step by making it about video games. But yeah, I think Ben, if he wants to come back, he'll be back, and that's just the way it is. I don't think that's great for the Steelers. Evan, you mentioned the draft, but the Steelers don't have a great draft pick. They'd probably have to trade up to get somebody. They could, I guess, and I don't know, but their cap situation's so messed up. They've got so many free agents as it is. I just don't know how they swing this while also being able to handle Ben Roethlisberger's desires to come back and play for Pittsburgh.
I don't think it matters that Ben Roethlisberger wants to come back. I think he's gone. When somebody's this vague about somebody, that means he's gone, but they're not ready to say he's gone.
Yeah, the language definitely resembles what the Rams were saying about Jared Goff, and we were questioning whether or not they'd be able to move him because of his albatross of a contract and the cap hit that came with that. But they managed
to Detroit.
Yes, they made it happen. So, I mean, anything is possible here for sure. But we'll move on to our final topic, again, regarding the quarterback. This time about the likely or almost certain to be number one pick in the draft. Trevor Lawrence will be out 5 to 6 months after having surgery on his non-throwing shoulder. The Jaguars or whoever, or his camp or whoever, insist that they think he'll be ready for training camp, but training camp is in 5 months, so I guess they're hoping that it'll be the 5-month part of that, not the 6-month version. Otherwise, he won't be back for training camp. So what the hell is this about? Where did this come from?
I don't know. I don't know where it came from, but I don't think it moves the needle in terms of Trevor Lawrence suddenly not being the number one pick or anything like that.
It's his non-throwing shoulder, so even if something kind of goes wonky with the surgery, like he's still gonna be able to throw the ball.
Something goes wonky with the surgery. Goodness gracious!
Yeah, like his arm falls off.
I wasn't thinking his arm falling off so much, but
they operate on the wrong shoulder. Like what could go wonky? That sounds horrible.
I don't know the nature of the operation, but I think that I don't think it matters what his injury is. If he had torn ACL, he'd still be the top pick. Like the Jags would happily take him having a redshirt medical year to have Trevor Lawrence as the future quarterback. So I don't think this matters a ton, but it was just a little bit surprising, especially because we noticed he had a pro day of sorts where he was throwing the ball around, and it was obviously before the combine or anything like that, and it was kind of a question mark.
It was combine.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I guess they're not doing it this year, but on account of COVID, which is smart. But I think that he's going to be fine, obviously, but it's just kind of a little bit of a shock to the system that the number one pick in the draft, the guy that's the most prized quarterback coming out of the draft since Andrew Luck, is not going to be around for big chunks of the offseason, and there's going to be question marks on whether or not he's going to be back for preseason games if they have them this coming season, whether or not he's going to miss a ton of practice time. It's unfortunate that there's some uncertainty around this guy because he's one of the few bright spots that a crappy team and a crappy franchise like the Jags will have, and he's not really going to be in the picture for a while.
Well, I mean, what is the offseason going to look like? Like, the pandemic is still going on. We might not even have an offseason. Like, there's going to be a bunch of Zoom meetings all spring and summer. And they're going to have training camp in, right at the end of August. And they're like, all right, guys, go play football weekend after Labor Day. Like,
yeah,
everything is different now.
For sure.
So, I did see today that a former NFL head coach ranked Trevor Lawrence as the number 3 quarterback in this year's draft class.
Behind Trevor and Lawrence?
Behind Mac Jones and Zach Wilson.
I don't know about that, but okay. Hugh Jackson and I will watch the tape and get back to him on that.
Yeah. All right, well, that wraps up our topic. We do have some late-breaking news. A passing bomb the San Diego Padres have agreed to a 14-year, $330 million deal with Fernando Tatis.
God.
With who?
With Fernando Tatis Jr.
14 years?
Yeah.
14 years.
Hey!
I will say, though, that is a bargain. He's underpaid. He should get twice that. For 14 years? I don't know. That's a hometown discount, as much as you can say $340 million is a discount.
But you also have to consider the fact that they did buy out his pre-arb and arbitration years, so they are giving some back on the front end when it comes to that. But of course, in 5 years, $23.5 million a year for Fernando Tatis Jr. is going to be an absolute steal. So I've always been a fan of teams giving up something on the front end like this, like where they buy a team out a little bit for their arb years. Damn phone. Have to throw the damn thing out the window. Anyway, so now that the crack ups have begun, so we should probably wrap this podcast up ASAP before it goes further off the rails. But
I wanted to mention. I forgot about Deshaun Watson. I listened to 105.7 in Baltimore all day today. And one thing that's on my mind is like the Panthers want Deshaun Watson. Well, I mean, everybody should want Deshaun Watson for the most part, but the Panthers are really looking into making big moves. They got their new owner. He wants to build a new stadium with a roof on it to host a Super Bowl, and he wants to get the Panthers from being, kind of type team to, one of the marquee teams in NFL. That interested me a little bit.
So one potential offering, which I don't think that this has actually come out of Carolina, but somebody threw it out there. Do you guys think that it would be wise for Carolina if they were to offer CMC and a first rounder for Watson?
Yes,
oh, absolutely. That's
no doubt.
Steal.
Yeah, running backs are replaceable, right? Send them, not Mike Tolbert. Who's the guy? Mike Davis.
Yeah, Mike Davis.
Send him that
came
guy
in
too.
last year.
Yeah,
Mike
Didn't
Davis
he also have Steven Davis.
He did well for a while until he didn't. But by the time that he wasn't playing that well, the whole team wasn't playing well anymore either. So.
Yeah, the thing about Christian McCaffrey is like he's obviously great, but he saw
2 games this season.
3.
He had a million touchdowns.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. He only played 3 games.
That's 50% more than you said.
But referring to his great year that he had before this season, where he was plagued with injuries, he put up like 2,300 all-purpose yards, had all kinds of touchdowns. He had an amazing season, and the Panthers are one of the worst offenses in the NFL. So, I mean, he just. And it's not his fault, but he
also didn't move the needle that much, clearly.
Yeah, which is the case for most running backs. I mean, you need the quarterback far more than you need the running back. I mean, I think that giving up Christian McCaffrey, in lieu of 2 other first-rounders, probably not a bad idea. I mean, for Deshaun Watson, top 5 quarterback, I mean, that's a special player that you're getting in return at the most important position in all of sports. I think that they would – I think that the Texans would be dumb enough to make that offer. So, if the Texans are dumb enough to make the offer, then chances are you should take it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I'm the Panthers and the Texans call me and say, we want 2 first-rounders and Christian McCaffrey for Deshaun Watson, I'd be running somewhere. I don't know where you would run to, but I'd be running and I'd be calling all the players involved like, y'all need to pack y'all stuff now. It's time to go. Like, I know you're with your family and it's the off-season, you're on vacation. No, you have to pack and go now. Just, if you're the Panthers, I mean, that's a slam dunk deal. These first-round picks, they get turned into Deshaun Watson. They get turned into Mitchell Trubisky or
Richardson.
Yeah, Trent Richardson. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Send Bridgewater, CMC, and a first rounder.
Yeah. Do they have an old running back? I know the Texans like those.
I think Mike Davis is probably their oldest running back, and I'm not sure how old he really is. He might not be that old.
Well, the thing about Christian McCaffrey is I don't know if he's already been paid, but he just finished up the end of his rookie deal. So
he got extended. He's the highest paid running back ever.
Exactly. So you've got the highest paid running back ever, which is not something you want on a rebuilding team because that's a big ass cap hit that is going to be of little use to you because you've got nothing to build around him. So I certainly don't think that that's a good move for the Texans. But like we said, the Texans are inclined to do stupid stuff a lot. So, and it's no shade to Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, he's a fantastic player when he's on the field.
Mike Davis turns 28 on Friday.
Okay, so
he's not super old, but he's also not a spring chicken as far as running backs go.
Well, how old is David Johnson?
David Johnson's 29, I think.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot more mileage on him, too.
Yep. So.
I was going to say, it says 65.
That's not the right one.
29.
Yeah. That would be impressive.
Yeah, I'd give him a lot more credit.
Tom Brady's still in the league. So,
Yeah, he's not a running back, though. Frank Gore is, though.
Yeah.
Frank Gore.
So before we get out of here, I think we need to acknowledge the sad news regarding Vincent Jackson's passing.
Yeah.
He was found dead in his in a hotel room in Florida, I think over the weekend. We obviously knew him best as a receiver for the Chargers in the early days of Phillip Rivers when he was there.
And then for the Buccaneers as well.
Yeah, for the Bucs, one of the best deep threats in the league. By all accounts, a great guy. Very tragic, dying at such a young age. He was only 38. So hopefully we get some more information on what exactly happened there. We obviously hope there's no foul play. But obviously thoughts and prayers to his family and friends, and he will be missed. So, another note that I want to make, thoughts for everybody in Texas that's freezing their asses off right now. I know
dealing with a government who doesn't want to do anything for them.
Yeah. So the political stuff aside, the people down there, regardless of how you feel about the people they elect or whatever, they deserve to be living in some level of comfort, not dying in their homes because they have no electricity. So hopefully everything gets settled there as quickly as possible. And, I'm going to keep them in my thoughts as well, because I think it's been understated just how big of a disaster that has become due to their lack of electricity. So keep them in your thoughts as well. Do you guys have anything else? Shout outs, anything of that nature?
Yes.
Yeah, Evan.
I want to shout out our listener, James Daly. He's a NASCAR fan and would reply to all my questions, all the dumb questions about basic stuff when watching races. And then also he got married recently. So congratulations to him on that as well.
Congratulations,
Absolutely.
James.
Congrats.
If anybody's seen and watched any of my my condensed game footage from Madden, my next video will be the first game of the regular season. That is going up tomorrow afternoon. So take a look at that. Drop a like, comment, let me know what I can do better. As I get set, I already played the week 2 game, and I'm getting set to start editing that one. That's all I got.
All right. So that'll do it for this week. This is episode 131 of the podcast. You can email us at thesportsballers@gmail.com if you have a mailbag or questions, concerns, comments, anxieties, anything you want to get off your chest about us or anything else. We don't care. We'll accept it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon. Basically, if it's available, we're on it. So and let us know if you found us and if you listen to your podcast in any other way and you have any other suggestions of potential media for us to get on. We'll take that into consideration as well. You can follow us on Twitter at Sportsballers18. You can follow us individually as well. Corey is at Corey Puffett. I'm at Quagmire67. And Evan is at Evan_Ash13. We tweet about various crap, generally sports, occasionally some other things. Evan just finds that so hilarious. He's going to type that in the title right there. So you may see that quote before the show. Well, that was it. So, but I hope everybody else is doing well, staying warm around the country. It's cold everywhere. Like I mentioned, in Texas especially, stay warm, stay safe. I will also follow up with the typical coronavirus PSA. Wear your masks, keep your social distancing, limit your contact with other people, bathe, tell the people you love that you love them, stay happy, smile a little bit, and be a good person. Just do that, and we'll get through this. But that'll do it for this week. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Eric. I was hosting this week. This is the Sportsballers Podcast, episode 131. We will see you guys next week.